Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, the director of the Missile Defense Agency gives us an update on the state of play for America's ability to guard against incoming threats and field threats of its own. Plus, the Marines expand their footprint in the Pacific. More presence in Australia and the addition of new radar systems on an island near Taiwan are part of the effort. Get an inside look at what they're up to. Also, a story of heroism, also from the Marines. Learn about a corporal who went back into a burning Osprey to save his comrades, and now will receive a posthumous award. And how do our allies down under set up life-saving surgery centers in the field? We go inside their mobile capability. It's the latest in news and analysis, from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. Each year, we get to sit down with top officials from the Missile Defense Agency to learn about updates on how the U.S. intends to defend from evolving missile threats and field advanced capabilities of its own. With the introduction of hypersonic weapons and rising aggression around the globe, it's a complicated picture for the agency to consider. At the recent Space and Missile Defense Symposium, we sat down with Lieutenant General Heath Collins to talk about developments within the Missile Defense Agency and what's on the near horizon. Here's part of our interview.
Hello, I'm Jen Judson, land warfare reporter for Defense News, and I'm here at the Space and Missile Defense Symposium, and this is our SMD debrief. Joining me is Air Force Lieutenant General Heath Collins, Missile Defense Agency Director, to discuss the latest on present, future, homeland, regional, global missile defense. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about missile defense.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna kick things off with a bit of a scene-setting question for you. Great. So the Missile Defense Agency has been around for roughly 2 decades. So give us a flavor of how missile defense threats have changed, how the missile defense process worked 20 years ago, how that's changed and adapted to stay ahead of the evolving threats that we're seeing.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. We're just a little over 20 years old, as you mentioned, as Missile Defense Agency, and as we began really focused on a particular threat, an intercontinental ballistic missile from a rogue nation coming into the homeland. The threat then was smaller numbers, known location from launches, ground-based launches coming towards the States, relatively simple reentry vehicles and simple scenes. And so that really was the basis of what our ground-based mid-course defense system was designed to go against. Lower numbers, simple threats, coming on a known trajectory, a ballistic trajectory. And then over the last 20 years, we've seen the threat mature in different areas and go in different areas. Certainly about 10 years in, we started focusing a little bit more on theater missile defense as things happened in the Middle East, and we started picking up a theater missile or regional missile defense mission set as well. So today's threat is really complicated, much more complicated than it was 20 years ago. The simple ballistic missile threat of the past is really in the past. Today's scenes are much more complex, many more countermeasures, much more deception, electronic warfare in those systems, as well the raid sizes, the sheer quantities of missiles have increased drastically, as shown just a few months ago in the Iranian attack on Israel. That large raid of ballistic missiles is something that we had never seen before. Also added to that then is on the theater side, we've gotten a much more complex threat, again, complex in the set of electronic warfare, electronic countermeasures, and the like. But then the threat has also looked to see where our ballistic missile defense system is, and they've tried to avoid it and attack where we may or they perceive we have a weakness.
What are some of the lessons that you have learned from events, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, that you are incorporating into development of systems that you will need for the future?
I think number one is that is what we need to expect moving forward.
Yeah.
The one-off, two-off, a few ballistic missiles, and that's it. That's really not the fight of the future.
Sure.
The fight really is going to be an integrated fires fight against us, attacking from surface to space, and we've got to be prepared both for handling all of those different flight regimes, from UAVs down low all the way to ballistic missiles in space. We need to be prepared for the complexity of that very complex seed and the sheer size of the raid size that we had to handle.
And can you provide an update on the is it SPY-6 radar? Or am I getting it wrong?
ANTPY.
It's ANTPY, okay.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about where you are with that radar as the possible radar for the architecture for Guam?
Absolutely. That is still the planned radar for Guam. That is, and as you mentioned, that is based on proven technology. It is the technology, the long-range discrimination radar that we've built up in Alaska to do ballistic missile defense of the homeland. It's that technology.
Yeah.
It's really one panel from an LRDR is really the technology that is the ANTPY-6.
Okay.
The first panel is on a boat on its way to Guam. To support a planned flight experiment that we're going to be doing in December, where we will use that one panel of a TPY-6, TP6. So now you get, it's hard to say.
I've confused you now.
So the TP6, along with we have one vertical launch system cell on the island, and we will be launching a target out of a C-17 in December, using the TP6 as the sensor to pick that up, and we will launch an SM-3 to intercept that off the island in December.
Excellent. So that sounds like it's on track for. I remember this being announced a year ago, so it still sounds like it's on track.
It is on track for December.
For the test. What do you expect the architecture to look like by the end of FY25? So a year and a half from now or so. What do you think will be available?
It will look like it pretty much will look like it looks today. We have that on the island, and that will continue. Our first construction money to start building on the island is 25. So we will still, by the end of 25, we will have begun some military construction on some of the sites.
I did want to ask about the glide phase interceptor. You mentioned that earlier to counter hypersonic threats. Budget analysts are worried that the effort is underfunded. So does the agency have what it needs to proceed to develop this critical capability?
We are, as I mentioned at the beginning, with the resource constraints applied to us, the decision was to make an earlier decision, and that is forthcoming. We're working that with our joint partner, Japan. We've signed a co-development agreement with them, and so we're working with the Japanese on finally that decision space later this year. And from that, we'll move forward. But as part of that now, as we end up picking whoever we pick to continue, we will come back and we'll have to assess the risk of that design, any corrective actions we would want to take or mitigation activities we would want to take with that design. And then we would re-baseline the program based on that with an updated independent cost estimate and those type of things to inform that program going forward. And so we'll work through the normal steps of an acquisition to ensure the strategy that we've taken, which would be a single vendor soon. We will then have to take up and make sure that we make that program executable.
Do you anticipate seeing an improvement in completing planned test activities? Many planned tests kind of get scrapped or delayed, or the agency is kind of not able to meet some of the required tests. Not at your fault potentially, but what improvements are kind of underway to be able to fix that testing track record and kind of get more up to date on the tests that you need to have done in various systems?
That's a really comprehensive question because one could point out at any one of the many programs that you require to do the test. You can point to the ground test architecture that we have, the ground test enterprise that we have, and then just the availability to really do an integrated test, you need everything available. And so the availability of operational assets to do the flight test is also a challenge. Really, we've just got, there's different approaches of how you schedule. And you can schedule to try to get everything done as quickly as possible, and then if anything happens, then you don't deliver that. we've just really, we're going to take a look at how we do baseline management, how we do baseline scheduling, how we assess risk and margin in our schedules to try to identify how we can streamline and ensure that if the elements and all the pieces are delivering on schedule and are firm on their execution, and we have some manageable amount of margin in the system. Because the flip side is you can put so much margin in it that it takes you forever to deliver everything, and nothing ever slips, but you're just not delivering capability fast enough. We always tend to focus on delivering capability sooner, and then there's obviously risk associated with that. And so we'll just, that's the nature of the business of acquisition is trying to get all those integrated lines together, all at the same spot to support a flight test and then an operational capability. And we'll continue to try to improve that entire enterprise as we move forward.
Well, we are out of time, but thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule here at the SMD Symposium to talk to me.
Yeah, great, Jen. Thank you. Really nice to spend time with you talking about missile defense.
When we come back, Marines expand their reach in the Pacific. Have a look at what's on tap for the Corps in the region when we return. Welcome back. The Marine Corps is always looking for ways to expand their footprint and advance capabilities, especially in the Pacific theater these days. The Corps has been engaged in a series of exercises in the region, with the possibility of Australia hosting greater numbers of U.S. forces also being considered. Additionally, the Marines are looking to place more radar elements close to the island of Taiwan. To unpack it all, ground warfare editor Todd South joins us with the story. Take it away, Todd.
Recent military exercises in the Pacific have the Marine Corps bringing new capabilities to new places and seeing potential for a larger footprint in the land down under. The Marines have sent as many as 2,000 Leathernecks on a rotational basis to Australia each year since 2012. That redeployment is called Marine Rotational Force Darwin, from the Camp Darwin location in the Northern Territory of Australia. Well, if Australia's Institute of Public Affairs has its way, that number could grow a lot. The think tank recently proposed hosting as many as 16,000 Marines on a semi-permanent basis in the Northern Territory training area. Report authors called it Australia's cheapest option to add forces that might deter an increasingly more aggressive Chinese military. Camp Darwin is a 1,400-mile straight shot to the southern edge of the Philippines, another U.S. partner where Marines and U.S. Army soldiers have been doing a lot of training in recent years. In July, Marines participated in Exercise Pitch Black and Exercise Predator's Run with Australia. Pitch Black is an annual aviation-centered exercise that integrates air assets from various partner nations in scenarios to defend Australia from a potential assault. Predator's Run combines forces from the United States, United Kingdom, Philippines, and Australia to train together in close-to-shore maneuvers such as amphibious raids. The Marines have been testing new gear, such as their naval strike missile, and more advanced sensors and radars during the Philippines exercises. The terrain offers exactly what Marine leaders expect its units must master to fend off the Chinese Navy near the shore or littoral zones. Along with those new platforms, new Marine formations are surfacing in the region. The Corps is currently building 3 new units specialized for the Pacific: the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment out of Hawaii, the 12th Marine Littoral Regiment in Okinawa, and another littoral regiment to activate next year in Guam. In late July, Marines from the 12th MLR partnered with the Japanese military to rapidly deploy the Corps' new ground-air task-oriented radar system to the island of Yonaguni, which is less than 70 miles away from Taiwan. The island is the last Japanese territory in an island chain that runs south from Okinawa, leading into Taiwan. The Chinese Communist government has long claimed Taiwan as part of its territory and has agitated for its return to Chinese control in recent years. Troops deployed the radar as part of training with enhanced sensing and targeting data between 12th MLR and the Japanese military during Exercise Resolute Dragon. That's a key mission for the new regiments: sensing threats, providing air defense, and targeting data for ships, manned aircraft, drones, and missile systems to thwart Chinese military advances. On top of these recent events, Marines continue to run their standard Marine Expeditionary Unit deployments throughout the Pacific, while also conducting partner exercises in the Philippines, Okinawa, South Korea, and Australia. Adding the new equipment and tinkering with these new formations are all part of the Corps' larger strategy to provide the Navy with eyes and ears, protecting its ships while also striking enemy targets. For Military Times, I'm Todd South.
Now from our allies down under, a look at how the Australian Army sets up mobile surgical facilities close to the battlefield. Check out how our friends across the Pacific prepare to treat casualties at what they call the Basic Medical Treatment Facility.
The Roll 2 Basic is a new capability for Army, which is a light and manoeuvrable surgical facility that can also hold patients after they have surgery while we await for evacuation. It's a setup that we're delivering in 4 tents with a really low profile. That means it can push pretty far forward to shorten the time from someone being injured to getting their life-saving surgical interventions.
So the Roll 2 Basic can be deployed in 2 20-foot shipping containers via land in trucks, via air on planes, via the sea in some of our LHDs. It can be underslung under CH-47s or via a smaller littoral transport asset to the beachhead.
We've got this happening in 4 tents at the moment. The first is a headquarters tent where patients are tracked. We have a resuscitation tent where there's 2 beds that we can start those life-saving interventions on. The next step in that journey is the operating theatre, which also has a sterilisation capability to extend our ability to stay in the field. And finally, there's a ward which has intensive care and low dependency beds where patients would wait for evacuation.
So when a patient comes through the Roll 2 Basic, the nursing officer will be at the head of the bed. Their role is to maintain airway and monitor for breathing. You'll have 2 medical technicians either side of the patient. Their roles will be a wet nurse, which is cannulation and administering medication. And on the other side, you'll have a dry medic who will be in charge of monitoring the patient, ensuring that pulse rate and blood pressure is within parameters, and then relaying that information to the medical officer. So once the patient is stable, it's up to the medical officer to decide whether they roll into the theatre room or they go into the intensive care unit.
So the Roll 2 Basic broadly can provide 12 hours of surgery every 24 hours, which for planning purposes is about 5 surgical cases.
So as a general surgeon, my role particularly is to provide really that surgical capability, particularly looking at that damage control, so that immediate surgery that needs to save someone's life in order to then be able to move that patient to more higher level surgical capabilities down the line.
I think the really cool thing about this capability, it's modular, so it can be shaped to support different tasks, whether that's a large-scale combat operation like we're supporting on Rhino Run this week, or a humanitarian and disaster relief mission. We have the capability to provide those interventions to people all across the spectrum of those environments.
People should be reassured that we are now confident that the Roll 2 Basic is a viable capability that can be deployed close to point of injury and save lives.
When we return, did you put any money away this week for that golden age retirement? We've got some tips on common ways to save. Don't go away. Welcome back. Like many troops, you might dream of a retirement life on a boat, eating fresh fruit and sipping champagne. But it'll stay a dream if you don't put some money away, soldier. On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union returns to give you tips on common ways to save for retirement.
Boston College's Center for Retirement Research recently published its annual financial outlook for Social Security, saying Social Security could take a 21% benefit cut 9 years from now. As a result, Social Security isn't something people a decade or more from retirement can fully count on. So what does that mean for you? Despite this news, saving for retirement always was and always will be essential. Of course, the best time to start saving for retirement is now, even if you don't have much room in your budget. Think about working with a professional to help you find ways to build wealth, whether it's through a savings account, CDs, IRAs, or even investing. Find out about tax-deferred savings, and if your employer offers a 401k match, take it. This is free money. Once you start saving for retirement, then it's time to plan how you'd like to live your retirement years. Will you downsize, upsize, work part-time? That'll help you estimate your magic number or how much you'll need for retirement. Everyone's number is different and it may change as your life changes, but what always remains the same is the importance of savings. So if you haven't started already, do it now.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, shoulder that rucksack over to militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most learned NCO in the division, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you find open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And until the government pulls the plug, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. When we come back, the story of a young Marine who gave his life trying to save his crew members after an Osprey crash. Stay with us. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. From virtually the moment he got out of school, Spencer Collard knew what he wanted to do. He would serve his country in the way that he thought was the best path he could find.
Spencer graduated in the year 2020. All of a sudden, he comes in through the door and he says, "I've signed up to be a Marine." And I asked him about that, and in his mind, it's the Marines are the top of the top. They're the best of the best, and he wanted to serve, he wanted to give back.
Having the courage to join the service wasn't uncommon for him, according to his family.
My mom likes to say the cream of the crop. He was just the best of the best.
In August of 2023, then Corporal Collard was one of 23 Marines in a V-22 Osprey flying as part of a joint exercise in Australia. That aircraft crashed, and 3 Marines lost their lives as a result of the incident. But Collard survived the crash. According to the Marines, he initially made it out of the wrecked Osprey.
The Marines came in and the colonel said his condolences and how sorry they were about our loss and everything. And then I forget exactly how he put it, but then he came out with, and by the way, your son didn't die in the crash.
Contrary to the family's initial belief, Spencer made it through the initial impact and then performed an act of true heroism. Collard went back into the burning aircraft and tried to save his comrades.
Spencer was witnessed leaving the aircraft after the crash. He walked away from it, and they had physical evidence of being outside the aircraft as well. Spencer realized that his friends weren't coming out of the cockpit, and so he jumped back into a burning aircraft to rescue the pilots. And unfortunately, he was overcome by smoke and flames and wasn't able to make it back out again. To be able to just go in there and to do that just totally unselfishly, you know, it says a lot about him. He had no intention of leaving us. I think he thought he could go in there and get the job done, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way.
For his selflessness that day, Collard will be awarded the Marines' highest non-combat honor, the Navy and Marine Corps Medal. The award is presented for acts of heroism in a non-combat setting at great risk of a service member's life. Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.